All right, there we go. I think I saw it on my end. I think we're live now.
Yeah, we're live.
All right, perfect. Thank you. All right, so thank you everybody for joining our workshop this morning. Just to start, anybody that hasn't joined us before for one of these, I'll give us just a brief overview of what Palm Beach Tech is and what we do. So to start with, my name is Nikki Cabuz. I'm the VP of Development for Palm Beach Tech. We recently just announced actually that we are going to be expanding to become a South Florida regional organization. So that's some big news for us. So kind of to give you an overview of what we actually do. So our whole goal and mission is to build South Florida into a tech hub. So we work with a lot of the colleges, universities, local coding schools, a lot of the headquartered companies that are here, from startups to your much larger, City Furnitures, FPLs, Florida Crystals, and really just trying to upskill the talent that's here, keep people here locally, connecting the tech community, and making sure that, like I was saying, that we're keeping our tech talent here when we're building, so that we're attracting new companies, attracting new talent, and continuing to grow the tech community. So I want to go straight into introducing Gessica from Wyncode and allowing her to do a brief interview of the organization and herself. And Jessica, yeah, please feel free to take it away.
Thank you, Nikki. Great. Morning, everyone. Happy Friday. Excited to share some information about user experience, user interface. Currently, I am the head instructor of UXUI Immersive at Wyncode Academy. It is normally located in Wynwood in Miami. However, right now, as we're all probably sitting at home during these I guess, like, we're starting to get used to these times, but these unfortunate and strange times, but we're still pushing through. It's been amazing how we've been able to sort of pivot, and we've actually completed, we're 1 week away from completing an entire 10-week cohort. So the UXUI Immersive program at Wyncode is 10 weeks, and it's intense, it's immersive, it's a boot camp. Like Army boot camps, I don't think I've ever heard anyone say they're easy. So we really immerse, and the whole goal is to leapfrog into a career into UX UI. Like how, I have 20 years of experience. How can you get to surface, scratch the surface of all of that knowledge? It is a pretty intense program, but it's amazing. Like, one thing that I realized, remote does not hinder learning, and the quality of the work is amazing from the students this cohort. So that's been exciting. But yeah, like I said, I started my career in the early days of the internet times in mid to late 90s. And I've just had a great experience working for many companies here in South Florida, lots of cruise, all the cruise lines actually over time, and the Miami Heat, and like great organizations here in Florida. So that's been amazing. And then City Furniture, you mentioned, actually one of the Wyncode grads works there currently. And it's kind of been my mission to make South Florida a place that cannot be ignored for world-class product design. And we have design, we can own design here in South Florida. And so I'm excited to share a little knowledge with you guys. And yeah, that's a little bit about me.
So Jessica, if you want to, you're welcome to go right into the workshop. I will be watching the questions on chat and social, so I'll make sure to kind of throw them out to you as I get them.
That's awesome. Great. Thank you. Okay, good idea. So I'm going to go ahead and start sharing my screen here. Let me just reposition a couple of things here. And great. Okay, so first I'm going to go ahead and share some slides. And then, so what I'm thinking is we'll do a little bit of background and then some good practices on UX UI, and then get into Figma. We were going to use Figma today to see how far we can get with creating some conversion driving forms. So you may not ever think forms are that important, but they're probably one of the most important things if you have a digital product, which actually you should. Out there, if you're, if you're not selling something, then what are you doing? But so you should be having some sort of lead gen, capture, a sign up form if you offer a service. So let me just get into some good practices here. All right. So, oops, let me just, yeah, so creating conversion driving forms. So converting, all the companies have kind of their own definition of a conversion. So a conversion could be someone filling out a form that gives you a lead. It might not necessarily be a sale, but the most common conversion would be a sale. So someone is buying your product or your service online, and they have to fill out their information. So we want to capture that information as seamlessly and easily as possible. So I want to just get into a little bit of fundamentals. So form design, there's lots of things there that we could talk about, but just at the basics, we should probably understand to start with, what is product design, or also known fondly as UX UI. UX is a problem-solving framework. It puts the user at the very heart of that process. It's normally, if it's done well, anticipatory, purposeful, and delightful to interact with. So I have lots of examples of those, but we'll discuss those later. So now if we break out those two pieces a little bit more, what is the difference between UX UI? I think the industry has kind of matched them up together. So I always like to just remind people that UX, user experience, is how something works. It's really our blueprint for our digital product. And you see that there's this image of a blueprint of a building, a great analogy for what UX is. We're first planning everything out. We need to know where all the rooms are going to go and what paths we're going to take and where are the hallways, and is the door on the roof? Probably not a good idea, right? So we're planning all that out. And you see like what's pretty commonly known as like a little flow chart here to talk about how you navigate through registration or creating a new account, just as an example. Now on the UI side, or user interface side, it's really how something looks. And it's in, again, with the analogy, it's our paint and our design in our home or our digital product. So you see that behind the scenes, there was the flow chart, the blueprint of how I should navigate through creating my account. Now, when I get to this screen here, you see beautiful design, very purposeful, anticipatory, and all those great things that I just mentioned. And so there's a lot that goes behind that. And before you start putting the paint on the walls and really defining the look and the feel, you first want to just make sure you're planning everything out. Okay, so something that we do in the class here at Wyncode is follow a UX UI process, or what it's sort of what I like to call, and I use a lot of analogies, you could probably tell by now. It's like our Google Maps for our digital product and how we navigate designing a digital product. So it's actually a lot harder than people think. I think that in the past, people will say, hey, we just, grab a developer, get them started on creating whatever website or digital product we need. And, we have a saying in design, the sooner you start coding, the longer it's going to take, because without planning it, you're really skipping important steps. And again, back to the analogy, if the building that you're sitting in didn't have a blueprint, and the construction crew and the electricians and the interior designers all showed up at the same time and didn't have a plan, we probably wouldn't even be sitting in that building. It would have fallen down. So it's super important to follow a process. It's important to get that momentum or inertia, otherwise you get stuck. So the framework that we use in class is like a 6-step process. It's not linear, even though it looks linear here. There's a lot of parallel pathing. things are maybe going on at the same time. You never stop learning, not to, when could we have the tagline, never stop learning, but that's also common for products. Like, it's not that we learn and we do our field and desk research and then we stop. We continue to, that's a common thread throughout. So the big point here in this illustration is to show or point out that the loop there, what we call the feedback loop, or IBM design thinking would refer to as the feedback loop, that's probably the most important part here. All of these pieces are important, but without iterating and testing, your product is, very unknown in terms of how it's going to turn out. So just to list out, we have step one, learn, which is conducting that research. Then once we know and have immersed ourselves in our product, we can start to put a little bit of definition around who our customer is, what they want, and then moving into design, we can start to conceptualize and visualize some of those ideas based on the first two phases. Then within the design, we're this design experiment iterate is a continuous loop. So we're testing, we're showing people our sketches, even our hand-drawn messy sketches, asking people to give us feedback, and then going back and making changes. And that continues across low fidelity hand-drawn sketches, black and white wireframes, and then high fidelity mock-ups. And so if you can imagine, there's probably 30 to 50 versions by the time we get to the last one. And even then, it's never done. Then even when it goes live, you're still iterating. And then launch is documenting, kitting all of the assets for the developers so that we can hand it off and it can be built. So what's interesting is most people or most companies will jump right into design and not do any of the research. So it's common. It is, it's something people want to see right away. They want to see something. So it's just, really defending those two steps so that you can get to a good place and make sure you're planning it out.
Jessica, we do have a quick comment here, a question in chat is, how is Google Design Sprint different than UX Framework?
Google Design Sprint. So I actually went to, speaking of, so Jake Knapp, who came up with the Google Design Sprint, I went to a conference here at the Mandarin. He's amazing. He used to work at Google, but his are more for a rapid 5-day just design. So there's basically, he takes all the research as inputs into that 5-day sprint. There's a lot of testing that's similar. And really his goal is, and I also have some experience at Google and the large big companies, the giants out in San Francisco, not always the most rapid to start. And that was his real goal here. By creating the 5-day sprint, he wanted to get something like an idea tested and validated with the internal team as quickly as possible. So his 5-day sprint incorporates like sketching something out rapidly, creating a prototype in Keynote, testing it, and then getting like a relatively I don't know about thought through, because 5 days is short, but something so that they can start saying, well, this is a good idea, we should keep going with it. So it's really more just like a 5-day quick ideation. It doesn't include like development. It's not like agile where you're coding within that. But what it does do that I love is the testing and the iterating. And then you kind of keep looping around. Do you need to make any changes? But I'm a big fan. My framework that I use is a combination of all my years of experience. Every company I worked at had, if not one, several processes. And so there's design thinking, there's all the, the company I worked for in San Fran was, it had 5 steps. or phases. Then we went with more of like a lean startup, build, measure, learn. So we went to 3, then we went back to like 6 or something. So, you know, it's taking the best of all the different frameworks and processes that I've learned out there. Lean UX is another one, which I have that book here too. If you haven't checked that out, it's really awesome. Basically, Lean UX and the 5-day sprint are lo-fi ways of testing out a concept. With design thinking, same idea. You're putting something out there, whether it's a hand-drawn sketch or an actual prototype that I can get a good feel for. And so I kind of take the best of all of that. But yeah, we actually do 3 projects within the cohort. So we loop through that framework that I just shared 3 times. So each project is 2 weeks. The last project, the first 2 projects are 2 weeks. The last one is 3 weeks. So they're pretty rapid, and that's part of the goal, is to teach people how to be, you know, relatively quick. The days of going off and doing research for 4 months are just over. So that's really the 5-day sprint from Jake Knapp and Google. Okay, well, let's get into forms, but let's first understand a little bit of basics. So something that I realized over time, especially within Wyncode and teaching, is that really half of what you need to know to be a really good designer relies on some basics: layout, typography, color theory, and what I love to call alignment obsession. And so we're going to break out, there's about these 3 that I'm going to cover: space, typography, and alignment. And, you know, those are really fundamental basics. And so just to start with that, why is space important? White space allows us to divide, to consume, and digest content. So on this example here, you see that there's a few elements going on here. There's some interesting little pattern textures in the background animating. I have Emma Watson, a little what looks like a bio of her, and then the product in the middle. But one thing that all that white space around the right hand side does is really draw my eye straight to that content. And also you see that it's all left aligned. The biggest mistake I think every new designer makes is they want to center everything. And I probably say at least 10,000 times throughout a cohort, like, hey, do you think you should try left aligning that? And then they just get tired of hearing me say it, and I finally break them down, and then they do it. But you know, it's just one of the, it takes time, it takes practice. But white space is actually an unofficial brand color for Google. When we would work on projects for them, that was something, obviously Google has all their colors, but then they would say, like, unofficially, we just love white space, and it makes things easier to consume. So I just thought that was so fascinating. You know, it's like I said, it's unofficial, but it's just something that they make sure that all their agencies would abide to. Okay, speaking of alignment, a little bit more here on alignment. What's the big deal? Centered text is not as scannable. It makes things feel cluttered. Where on the other, so on the left side, you're seeing a scroll of West Elm's website, and they used to, I can't remember if it's Macy's or West Elm, that they centered a lot of product detail, and like, I'm just gonna see the free shipping is all centered. The items under those products are centered for the 20% off. Then these guys are centered too. It makes it really hard for your eye to follow and scan quickly. Now, I use this example in class, and 2 cohorts ago, so one of the students had pulled it up, and I think that they had changed it. And all the centered text had been changed and gone left aligned. And like I said, I can't remember if it was West Elm or Macy's. And because I think I went to the Wayback Machine to get this screenshot. But On the right, you see Airbnb's website really adheres to that left alignment, and you know, the tagline, the photos, and then the information below that, it's all left aligned. And it also does provide you with that nice open white space. The other thing that it does is that CTA, the call to action here for searching for your place to stay, it allows it to stand out like really well, to have that nice white space behind it. Okay, typography. Well, there's quite a lot here when it comes to content on your digital products. So one thing, so I have two examples here. I have the one on the left and the one on the right. And the one on the left is the don't do, and the one on the right is the do. So something that you're seeing commonly, I find too, that students or people entering the design world love to put these like lines to thinking that they're grouping things together, but in the end, they're actually really creating like a odd separation. Centered text, like we just talked about, and then this call to action here being centered as well. So on the right-hand side, it's the same size module, but I'm creating hierarchy with the different typography, with the different font styles. So we have apples and oranges, which is bold. Then underneath that, there's a little bit of information which says 2-minute read. So if that was a article, it gives me a little bit of information. It's smaller and it's like a lighter gray. Then you have the can you gather what is in this content based on scanning, is the content there in the module, which is left aligned, well spaced out, and it is you know, different look than apples and oranges and the 2-minute read. And then that button, the CTA, is also back to left align, and it stands out. It's like the one thing, if you we always call it the 5-second test, like, or the squint test. So if I were to squint and look at this, what stands out? Is it the thing I want to stand out? And it is, because I want the title of it to stand out. I want the CTA to stand out. And so certain things that you're seeing here actually are that you really want to try to stress test your UI elements with real content. So even if it's not being pulled in from an actual database, you want to know, are things going to wrap? So does apples and oranges ever have a title that makes it wrap to 2 lines? If it's an article title, you want to put those parameters in place, test it out, stress test it. Also, the laws of proximity. So there's the laws of UX. There's a 20 or so of them, very interesting way of tackling best practices. And one of those is the laws of proximity, and it's just all about keeping items that belong together. So not like the one on the left is breaking that. And then Hick's law, which is another one, is all about decision making and knowing, like, how should I decide? It has to be really rapid, and you have to like kind of be able to pull me in with those strong calls to action. Or for example, even nav, like if there's too many items in your nav, we're breaking Hick's law. Again, hierarchy, typography, use those different treatments to create that hierarchy. You know, show variation. So not all the text has to be the same. And then, you know, use that white space again. And then if you want, there's that little link there. Whoops, I just covered it with the slides, but when we send out the slides, you'll have that link for the laws of UX. Any questions on the basics? I don't know if anyone popped in there on just really high level. Getting good at that will make your forms already better. One of the other things that I really push for, and companies are, this is like the hot topic for many large organizations, is creating a design system. So this design system is like, what are all, so like if I flip back here, Our design system for our cards, for our articles about whatever, apples and oranges, all of them are going to function like that. I have this CTA, that's my primary, that's how it's going to look every time. And it really starts to put guidelines, parameters in place for the company so that they're not inconsistent experiences across their brand and their digital products. So here I'm just really focusing on one of many elements of a design system, CTAs. Also, you know, that stands for, like I said before, calls to action. It is the one thing on your screen that you're telling the user they should click on. So every screen should really just have one action. The more actions you give them, the more we break the Hicks law. Decision making. You're creating what, again, another one of those sayings from the agency world is analysis paralysis. So if there's too many things to try to figure out, like, you're just gonna get overwhelmed and escape and go somewhere else. Okay, so for CTAs specifically, conversion rates can increase, bounce rates can decrease with a clear path. And so if your CTA stands out well, that is considered a clear path. This is just a snippet of what you would end up with in your design system. Obviously, there's so many other things. And if anyone, has anyone actually ever gone through material.io, like the material design, which is Google's design system? Like, it's intense. Like, they spent a couple years documenting everything across all Google products. So that's why more recently, within the last 10 or 12 years, Google's products have started to actually feel like one cohesive brand in that you interact with, not a bunch of different splintered brands. I know somebody that used to work on the material design team, and that he was telling me that in their process of documenting material design, they would take paper and hold it under light and see how the different shades of light would fall. And so that's where you get a lot of the, like, the cards and that those floating fobs, like the FABs, the floating action buttons. So it's just really fascinating. Lots of good stuff in there. It's a lot of best practices already baked in. But here, so this is actually on the top, the button, and then where it says button, and then the solid button underneath. That is from material design. And you see the one that's solid filled in purple is primary. And then the secondary would be the unfilled. And then the third one we call tertiary is usually like a text link. So what this is saying is you should never have, in the rules, it will say, like, never have two primary buttons next to each other. It will confuse people, because I'm like, if I'm the user, I'm like, what do you want me to click on? What do you suggest I do? And you see here that, and then I'm gonna just skip over the animated one for a second, go down to the bottom where you see the blue primary, the secondary, and tertiary. And that could be something that you might see on a form all together. So the alternative is 3 solid blue buttons that all say something different, and the user just doesn't know what to click on, versus this, which is, I think, based on the hierarchy of these buttons, you want me to click on the solid blue one. But there might be alternate paths or other things that are secondary or tertiary actions. So one example could be like login. So is login the most common, and should that be primary? Then secondarily, create account if you don't have one yet, or tertiary might be like learn more about why I should sign up. So they're all kind of related, but they should not ever be treated exactly the same. And this definitely will come up in our forms. The one in the middle is just a great example of visual confirmation that I've clicked on that button. So if the button doesn't change, sometimes people will get confused, like especially in purchasing. they might click on buy or place order, and if nothing changes, they click on it again, or they tap on it again and again. And I've even seen websites that say, don't press submit more than once. Your credit card will be charged twice or 3 times or however many times you tap on it. In that case, I'm thinking like, that's just bad back end or bad development. Don't ever blame the user for a mishap on the development, or I don't know, I guess the reliability end. Okay, so CTAs are one of my favorite things too. The easiest thing to do is just always just default to primary, secondary, tertiary, have your system for those 3. Any questions before I move into a little bit more on forms best practices now? Okay, just let me know. Okay, so forms best practices. Sounds a little boring, but I get really excited about this. Luke W., one of my favorite UX heroes out there, is trying to remember. He used to have his own company called Boxes and Arrows. Great resource. He wrote a white paper in, I think it was 2008, about forms. All sort, like 100 and something pages on like, should the field labels be left aligned? Should they be centered? No. Should they be right aligned? Should they be on the side? Should they be on the top? What should your buttons look like? And actually, he's the one that really started us off with the CTAs, the primary, secondary, tertiary. And, you know, forms and best practices around that can really make or break your sale, like I was saying before, or sign up or lead or whatever you're capturing.
Jessica?
Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt. Real question, because I didn't want to get too far into it. Was somebody had asked, are there courses for UI best practices overall?
Are there courses for UI best practices overall? You know, there's all the boot camps will cover off a lot of those best practices. And, you know, there's probably, if you Google like UX UI best practices, you'll have plenty to look at out there in the world. But yeah, I have so many best practices that it kind of starts to, you know, it's like which ones. And so just trying to scratch the surface of basics like alignment, the good spacing, not having competing CTAs. Those are a great place to start. And also Luke W's white paper. So definitely start there. Wyncode, sign up. We do 10 weeks of best practices. But yeah, usually I'm thinking like there's a lot of Udemy stuff out there, design thinking. Don Norman, who is coined the father of UX, he has some interesting approaches to best practices that can be applied to UI. Okay, hopefully that answered, and I'll try to find, if I can find some links, I'll share them for when you send out the follow-up email. So again, forms are really the most important thing that you're gonna design on your website. And something that you're just seeing a really, really simple representation here. The rules on forms: 1 column, 1 field per row, and I just repeat that over and over. And again, that's just one of those things that people just feel like it's just like centered text. It's like, but no, I wanna, like, shouldn't first name and last name go side by side? And when I click into the next screen, you'll see why, but this is a great example of all the best practices baked into this form. So on the left here, we have what you get by signing up. What we give you, there's some bullets, I just made them up as an example, what we give you, and that would go there. Clear benefit to why you should actually sign up right now. And then maybe even some sort of offer to entice you to come do this. So that's something that I call effort to benefit. Whoops, I'm missing my T on the end there, but I'm going to put in all this effort. What benefit am I going to get back from you, the company that I'm signing up with? So that has to be really clear from the beginning, or you will not get people to sign up or do whatever you're asking them to do. Another thing so now that's the effort to benefit on the left. Now on the right, again, you're seeing that one column, one field per row represented here. So you, I'll get into when we do the forms, if you break any of the rules, how you would do that. But this is something that will make your form longer. And that's usually the argument is like, oh no, we got to fit the form above the fold. And mobile has really changed that view. Is people are used to scrolling. And so don't worry if it's a really long, it shouldn't be a long form to begin with, because you should only be asking for the most relevant information. Okay, so we have our form with one column. Our CTA that is primary, which is try it free. It stands out more than anything on the screen. Not now or skip is allowing user control. So yes, maybe they can't use, maybe I can sign up for, if I don't sign up for Amazon, I can't buy anything, but I could probably still look at products. So you wouldn't want to, if you stop someone at the very beginning of your experience and you're like, give me your sign up, well, what do I get? Why should I sign up? So you might even want to push it and let them skip it or not do it now, and really understand the benefits throughout the browsing experience. The other thing, orientation. Orientation in the form of a progress bar. How many steps is this sign up? So it looks like I'm in step 1 and I have 2 more to go. So again, just, communicating as much as you can to the user to set those expectations. Now I had mentioned Luke W., the paper, one of the things that he really relied on was heat mapping. And that red that you're seeing down the left-hand side is why we are now 12 years later in a one column, one field per row, left aligned with the field label on top situation. So what he's showing here is the eye scanning in the tracking of forms shows that users scan down the left side, which goes back to our alignment point. Where should the field label be? It should be left aligned. And if you have more than one field in a row, the eye starts bouncing in a zigzag, and you don't want that. Okay, so that's pretty much our quickie there on some best practices and some good tips that you can bring into your designs. We're gonna go with into Figma. It's a web-based tool, very similar to Sketch, and Sketch is industry standard across almost like all the big companies and agencies. I teach Sketch in the class, and we also dabble in Adobe XD, which is another great tool to use. And then Figma is an online, again, like I said, very similar though to Sketch. So here's the forms that we're going to create. And you see those best practices are incorporated here in our shipping and our payment screens. And so we have all that knowledge that I just shared with you, the left alignment, one field per row, except for sometimes the students break me down and they say, well, what about state and zip code? Because they're so small. It's just like 2 letters. So I still go with err on the best practice, which is 1 field per row. If you ever broke that rule, that would be the only place I would do that. And I still probably wouldn't do it if I was designing the form. But like I said, the students broke me down at times. Here on your expiration date and the code, Another one that's kind of a short entry, but you know, again, be very sparingly. By the way, the payment options, those are not fields, they're logos. So, and you'll see that. And then a really strong call to action to keep you moving forward. I have a quick demo here of, and so when I send the slides out, just in case you forget how to do things, just a quick demo here of how to insert the canvas, how to get started with the shapes that will end up being your UX, your wireframes. So what we're gonna do today is create wireframes, which are black and white representations of our digital form. So it's not necessarily quite UI yet, but you could add that once that's all figured out. And then I'll share that over. So let's just jump over here to Figma.com for the last 15 minutes. Any other questions, you guys, before we do that here? All right. Something that you got, I don't know if it was provided to you guys before that we were going to be using Figma, but take a second to pull that up, Figma.com. It's free. You can register and you just start a new project, and then you would go into, like, I can show you where. See, I have a lot of files here already, but if you didn't have anything yet, it would, I think what is there is like a big plus sign to add a project, or up here to the right. So I'm gonna click on new project to start that new project, but actually I'm gonna go back to the other one here. Okay, so these are the screens that I was gonna have us practice with here, and you see we have our 3 steps. In my purchase path here, in my purchasing form, I have, again, the best practices. Step 1 is shipping. I see I have 2 more steps. Now, is anyone wondering why not just put the login as step 1, or or the sign up, right? And so maybe this should be create account, actually. So that you just don't want to hit people with that create account ever. It's always like, now the best practice is something that I started to notice in hotel bookings. You, on hotels.com, you book your hotel as a guest. So you do guest checkout. And then at the very end, they say, hey, since we already have most of your information, would you like us to create an account for you by just entering a password? And you can check a little checkbox off, enter just a password, and it will tell you like why you should do that is probably so that, you know, if you ever have to reach out to your the hotels.com a contact person, or if you want to be able to look at your account or leave a review, or, you know, many good reasons to sign up. Okay. All right, so let me just walk us through. Hopefully we could get through one of these screens and get some good practices in. So here I have, I'm gonna just enter this. Let me just give you a little tour here. Up at the top, we have our most common shapes and items that we use in design. So this one that says frame is your canvas. Just like in a painting, you need something to paint on. You need that to put all your elements on, or else they're kind of floating around on this infinite workspace. The other thing that we use quite a bit is the shapes drop down. So it has everything really we need to create any sort of interfaces. I create and teach my students to create everything from scratch. Using templates are probably more limiting in the end. Some people will just go download a template, but in the end, it's like it doesn't quite do what you want it to do. So we always do everything from scratch, and you know, first learn to do it from scratch. Then if you want to use a template, great. It'll be a lot easier. Now, the other items we have here are like vector tools, type tools, the hand that allows you to move around the workspace. On the left column here, we have layers and assets. So layers is all your elements. And you see those are showing up here underneath the layers. It's every little item that you put on your screen. Now, depending on what you do, your right-hand bar are your attributes to whatever you're clicked on. So if you're clicked on the canvas, you have things like measurements of that canvas, some of the fill, the background, how to export that canvas as a PNG if you need to share it. And then, but if you go into an actual element here, like depending on if it's a shape, you then have other measurements. So that measurement now becomes measurement of the shape or the color or fill of that shape or stroke. Same thing if you were to click on text, you have your alignment tools, your text size, same idea here, like on the alignment of elements and things like that. So whatever it's very smart in the way of whatever you're clicked on, that right-hand bar is what's allowing you to change it. These things up at the top are symbols and components. So if you want to reuse them, and that will create, start to create your design system. So great. So that's like a quick little tour. What's so cool about these tools nowadays is that when you click on the canvas, now look to the right, you see all these different template size templates for different phone devices or tablet or desktop. So whatever you're creating, you're going to agree with your team what size you're going to tackle, and then just pick one of them. You can also do a custom. So I think it was like this iPhone 11. So once you click on that, it drops right into the canvas, and we have I'm going to just start putting a couple items in here. First, the gray box on the top, I'm using that as something that people usually forget about, which is the status bar. So you don't want to start your design too high up, because let's see what happens here when I click play. So you see that that's not the screen that I was, but you see that little dip that comes down when I put it in the device. I don't want my elements to be cut off there. Go back here for a second. Okay, so just reserving a little bit of space there. Different phones have different sizes. And just start out with a little bit of our progress meter here, or progress bar, and just something simple, not getting too detailed. The one thing that you do want to make sure is that if you have circles there, that they're proportionate and not like squished like that. So I'm just going to change that fill here to something a little bit darker. And then I tend to copy a lot of elements to start with. So I option, and then holding shift allows that to stay aligned. So option shift and then drag that. And then I'll do one more here. And I have even spacing. If you hold option down and then hover on another element, you can see how far away it is. So now I can see 22 in between. I'm going to go ahead and make those shift, click, click. We'll select both. And then make those a little bit lighter color. Now, having a little title of what step you're in or what steps all three are is also highly recommended. But let's just go into these fields here now. Something to note, does anyone know the the size that Apple, actually to get your app approved on Apple, most of these things are baked into the approval process, which yay, Apple, for supporting UX best practices. For example, the size of a tappable area. So remember, we're doing mobile here. And you have, has anyone ever filled out a form and tried to click in the form and it like you're tapping on like maybe 3 fields at once? So that's what we're trying to avoid. So the minimum best practice size for a field or any tappable space is 44 by 44. And I always say you can err on the minimum, but that's just the minimum. So I'll probably go a little bit larger. So you see this is 54. So it's 10 pixels larger than the minimum. And then I'm just gonna go ahead and unfill that. And the only time I barely ever use borders is on fields. And even then, play around with your in black and white wireframes. Nothing should ever be just black, like full FFFFF black or whatever it is, because, or is it 0? 000 FFF is white. There's so many shades of black and white in between, and that creates good hierarchy. Remember, certain things should stand out. If everything was solid black, I don't know that it would stand out that well. And then I'm noticing that my fill is like a little bit pink.
Jessica,
okay,
we do have a question in there too. Says, I see we're selecting iPhone Max Pro, but when working for a company, do teams prepare for each phone? And is there an option to fix the circles so that they don't become that way?
Okay, so the first question about the selection of the size device, ideally your development team is gonna create the designs to be responsive. Now, choosing the size, there's a website, the Stat GA counter. Your team and who your users are, what country they're in, are all gonna be factors in deciding. Are they using it with one hand? Are they using it with a left hand? Like there's a lot to consider there. And that research, what I usually do is I go with the most common denominator and above. So if I look at stats and it says that 16% are on the biggest, newest phone, that's not enough audience for me to reach. So I'm gonna take probably the combination of the 60 to 70, 80%, which might be a smaller size phone. And that smaller size will always allow the bigger phone sizes to fit that size, if that makes sense. That's a decision you have to make with your team. And like I said, it really depends what country and what audience you're launching to. So if it's India, it's definitely not going to be the newest, biggest screen. And rarely do you do the newest and biggest screen. It's the 2 or 3 sizes ago. And then that at a minimum will not cut off on the bigger screen sizes. Okay, the circles not squishing. The trick there is to hold shift when you create anything, or even with images. If you've ever seen like squished images and they all of a sudden it looks like you're in a carnival mirror, it's because someone didn't hold shift. I always say shift is your new best friend. All right. Hopefully that answers. I'll provide that GA stats counter link too. It's fascinating, actually. It's really cool. Okay, so just giving maybe this field here a little bit of corner radius so that it's not so hard edged. So I might try to do 3. You know, that looks a little bit more like a field, like an open text field. And then you see that I'm really tight with my my alignment here. So I know I have 25 on the left, 26 on the right. I can't do anything about the 1 pixel. And then here for my field label, something that you can, and then make sure that you're left aligning your text And then you'll bring that right on top of your field. So spacing. I like to use increments of 8. So that's 9. I'm gonna arrow down 1, and now I see that I'm 8 pixels away from the field for full name. Now there's cool things you can do to save fields so that you don't have too many things for the user to do. Putting field titles inside the field is, you might think, oh, I can save space. Not all browsers support this. Also, once I click in, has anyone ever clicked in and then forgot what the field was? So there's ways around it. There's animated transitions, things like that. But I usually just rely on putting it outside. And then I would like group this. This is my look and feel for my field. And then that way, when I start making copies, and then between fields, I'm gonna double that 8 to be 16. And so now I can go into my next field, which would be address. So I just realized it's 11 o'clock already. Time flies when you're having so much fun. And, but you know, I'd love to see if anyone has more questions. Just keep repeating what I went over here and all those best practices. And you'll have great turnout on your conversions on your forms.
Jessica, we do have one more question came through. It says, if you resize the box that says address, how do you make sure that the text in it also resizes?
If you resize, so you can set things to be like responsive, but I probably wouldn't resize the text. I would just resize the field itself. I guess I wouldn't, as long as the field labels are the same across, but you can do this fixed position, not fixed position when scrolling, these constraints here that will resize things if you do that. I usually just keep everything consistent. And then something else that it's probably worth mentioning is the different screen sizes. When I worked at agencies, like, yeah, you cannot design for 70 different screen sizes. It would take forever. So I usually would do not necessarily mobile first, which is what a lot of companies do, because in my experience, things change when you get to desktop, and then that could change your mobile. So my approach is one screen across 3 breakpoints: mobile, tablet, desktop. And that should be enough to give you enough planning for the different variations of sizes. And Figma's awesome too, how it lets you do this This might not fit. I think the screen size might be off here, but if you press on that play button after you make your connections, you see that it gives you that full experience here of being able to see what everything looks like. And the reason why this is cutting off is because that frame was created a couple screen sizes ago. And so even your wireframes can get outdated there. So let me just go back here real quick. And that, prototyping tool over here, you see it there. There's also the prototyping section. And when you can see how there's design, prototype, and then code. So design is what we did. Prototype would be, it's super easy. It's so cool. You just click on either the screen and drag the arrow or an element. And in this case, I'm using the button. And then you're able to connect all those screens together and then try it out and test it. Like we were talking about earlier, how important that testing is. So I'd love to see if anyone send it to me later if you guys create any cool forms with Figma. and using those nice best practices, left alignment, space.
Yes, and thank you so much, Jessica, for doing this today. I say if anybody has any suggestions for future workshops and as well, because I'm getting some questions in private chat about that, please let me know. And of course, I did drop the link in there to the Wyncode site about their UI UX program. And, definitely you can click on curriculum so you can kind of see some of the different things that they go through. But yeah, unless anybody's got any other last minute questions here, we're right at time. So I just want to be cognizant of that and not keep anybody too long. I've got a couple thank yous in there. Raheem says, how can we send her to view her? So do you want her to view your page, Raheem? Is that what you're asking? Not exactly sure of the question.
Yeah. I think I know what he's saying. So if you want, connect with me on LinkedIn, and then you can actually share your prototype link, or we could just sidebar it. I'll give you my email and you can shoot me over some screenshots.
There you go. Perfect. Yeah. And like I said, we'll send a follow-up email. So anything that you want us to get out in there, Jessica, please email me and we'll make sure that everybody receives that information.
Yes, definitely. And I look forward to seeing you guys in the future, hopefully in person, maybe one of these times. And
yeah,
congratulations on this achievement, you guys, to make the organization a little bit broader. And we're excited. I'm excited for you guys.
Thank you. Yes, we are too, because we get to partner more with people like you. So it's wonderful.
Yeah, and I'm looking forward to going up there and you guys coming down here or somewhere.
Exactly. Exactly. Well, again, thank you, everybody. I will make sure again to follow up and just wanted to thank everybody for joining us this morning.
Okay, thanks, everybody.
All right, thanks Jessica.
Yep.
Bye.